Welcome to Old Rare Files. If you enjoyed the content, please subscribe, become a member, and like our content.
Children stand behind barbed wire in a concentration camp during the Holocaust. The image reveals the harsh reality faced by thousands of innocent lives during World War II. Toddy. Human remains displayed in a museum, highlighting modern preservation and skeletal analysis techniques within archaeology, helping reconstruct aspects of past individuals' lives and health. A man with an amputation takes part in adapted physical activity during World War I. Exercises like this were used to rehabilitate wounded soldiers. A baby surrounded by trophies in a studio portrait from the early 20th century. The scene reflects the era's custom of creating symbolic and curious images, highlighting family success and prosperity. Construction of the Berlin Wall in 1961, separating East and West Berlin during the Cold War. The structure became one of the strongest symbols of political division between the Soviet bloc and the West. A black student faces hostility while attending a newly integrated school after the landmark ruling of Brown v. Board of Education. The image reflects racism and resistance to desegregation in 1950s America. A man takes part in a photographic trick in a studio in the early 20th century, creating the illusion of being without a body. This type of photography used staged setups and hidden elements to deceive the eye, and it was very popular in fairs and studios of the time. Limited portions of foods like meat, sugar, and butter illustrate the rationing system imposed on civilians during World War II. A beach filled with vehicles, troops, and ships after a massive military landing, possibly during D-Day, one of the most decisive moments of World War II. Soldiers advanced through snow-covered mountains during military operations in extreme terrain, possibly during World War II. Harsh cold and high altitude made combat even more difficult. A child uses a therapeutic device designed for posture correction and physical strengthening, reflecting experimental approaches in medicine for pediatric rehabilitation in the early 20th century. Elizabeth Taylor relaxes between takes on a film set in the United States, offering a glimpse behind the scenes of Hollywood during its golden age in the 1950s, 1960s, 1960s. A futuristic prototype with a transparent cabin illustrates innovative ideas for personal mobility, reflecting mid-20th century optimism and visionary concepts about the future of transportation. Soldiers perform a haka, a traditional war dance of the Maori, during military training, demonstrating unity, discipline, and cultural identity within the armed forces of New Zealand. An interracial wedding in Mississippi in 1970, symbolizing a historic shift after segregation laws were overturned, following the Loving v. Virginia decision. A woman leans over the hood of a classic car at a gas station in the United States, reflecting the growing car culture and lifestyle of the 1940s, 1950s. Runners prepare to start a race during an official competition, as a large crowd and a band watch, highlighting the growing importance of sports during the early editions of the Olympic Games in the early 20th century. Children play in a narrow courtyard between working-class houses in the United Kingdom, reflecting living conditions during the early 20th century and the legacy of the Industrial Revolution. Harry Houdini on public display before performing one of his acts, challenging audiences with his escape and illusion skills. A patient undergoes treatment with one of the early X-ray machines, a technology that spread in the early 20th century after the discovery of X-rays by Wilhelm Conrad Röntgen in 1895. Workers position suspended steel beams during bridge construction, demonstrating the precision and danger involved in early 20th century industrial engineering. A woman washes clothes by hand in an outdoor basin, a common household scene before washing machine became widespread in the early 20th century. A soldier's helmet reads, "Where is Lee Harvey Oswald? Now that we really need him," referencing Lee Harvey Oswald during the Vietnam War, highlighting the dark humor and tension among troops. The Reichstag lies in ruins after heavy fighting during the Battle of Berlin in 1945. The site became a powerful symbol of Nazi Germany's collapse. Allied soldiers write messages on bombs during World War II. Phrases like "to the Axis" from USSR and USA symbolized unity against the Axis powers. Tanks advanced during World War II, likely in Europe, as civilians gather nearby. The image captures the war's direct impact on urban life and civilians. A woman performs a dart act in the 1950s, combining entertainment and skill. Such performances were common at events and resorts of the time. A scene set in a technical environment from Dr. No, highlighting the contrast between tropical settings and industrial interiors, a hallmark of films from that era. Workers and soldiers stand atop a massive railway-mounted cannon, highlighting the impressive scale of these weapons used in 20th century conflicts, especially during World War II. A sign reading "Caution, beware of natives" exposes institutionalized racial segregation during apartheid in South Africa, reflecting the official racism of the time. Behind the Scenes of Frankenstein, 1931, showing the actor as the monster alongside director James Whale. The image highlights how practical effects and makeup created one of cinema's most iconic characters. Scientists surrounded by thousands of medicine bottles, illustrating the growth of the pharmaceutical industry in the 20th century. Mass production made treatments more widely accessible. Men examine a giant mushroom, likely linked to nuclear testing during World War II. Its shape resembles the mushroom cloud, a symbol of atomic explosions of the time. A milkman using skis to make deliveries during a harsh winter. Before modern infrastructure, workers adapted simple methods to keep essential services running despite heavy snow. Water skiing in tropical waters reflects the rise of recreational sports in the 20th century, driven by tourism and leisure culture. Portrait of Mick Jagger, Keith Richards and Peter Tosh in 1978, capturing the meeting of British rock and Jamaican reggae, two genres that shaped generations. A woman calmly poses next to a lion at a zoo, showing how in the early 20th century there was less concern about safety when interacting with wild animals. Sailors of the Imperial Russian Navy pose aboard a ship, highlighting naval discipline and daily life in the early 20th century, with ropes and equipment neatly arranged in the background. Participants in a 1940s, 1950s beauty pageant talk backstage wearing swimwear and high heels. The scene captures a more informal moment among the contestants, showing the social atmosphere of these events, which combined competition, interaction, and public exposure. A man from the 1920s, 1930s tests an experimental device attached to his hat, featuring a clock and a connected metal tube. These unusual inventions reflected a time of technological innovation and creativity, when many experiments aimed to simplify everyday tasks, often in bizarre ways. A civil rights protest in the United States around the 1960s shows people holding signs and forming a human chain. Messages like "Give us liberty, not death" reflect the fight against racial segregation and for equality during one of the most intense periods of the movement. An experimental U.S. aircraft carrier from the 1920s, 1930s shows multiple biplanes lined up on its deck. These ships marked the beginning of modern naval aviation, allowing aircraft to be launched from the sea and transforming military strategies. A group of European travelers poses with camels in front of the Sphinx and the pyramids of Giza, Egypt, in the late 19th or early 20th century. The scene reflects the growing tourism in the region, driven by Western fascination with ancient Egypt. A traditional house made of mud and straw, photographed in a rural area in the early 20th century. This type of construction was common in poorer regions, providing shelter using accessible materials. The image highlights the simplicity and adaptability of families to their environment. Bernauer Strasse in Berlin, 1962, shows a man walking near the Berlin Wall under armed surveillance. Built in 1961, the wall divided the city between East and West during the Cold War, symbolizing the political and ideological split between two systems. Office of Adolf Hitler in Berlin, photographed in 1929, before his rise to power. The modest setting contrasts with the role he would soon play, leading Germany during the Nazi era and World War II. A rare underwater image shows a man swimming near a protected camera in the early 20th century. Photos like this were extremely difficult to capture at the time due to technological limitations and low underwater visibility. View of the city of Nokia in the late 19th century, before it became globally known. At the time, the area was marked by local industries and small factories along the river, forming the foundation of the city's economic development. Members of Pink Floyd during a relaxed photo session in the 1960s. Their psychedelic style reflects the early phase of the band, which would later revolutionize music in the following decades. A model poses on a boat in a harbor in the 1960s, reflecting the style and aesthetics of the time. Photo shoots like this were common in magazines and campaigns, highlighting casual fashion in maritime settings. Aerial view of Roswell after urban development, showing the area linked to the famous 1947 case. The event remains one of the most discussed in history regarding possible unidentified objects. A family camping with cars and tents in nature in the early 20th century. This style of travel became popular with the expansion of automobiles, marking the beginning of road tourism and modern camping. Female tennis players wearing typical outfits of the time, including skirts and light blouses, early 20th century. Women's sportswear still followed more conservative standards, even during physical activity. A woman poses sitting on a motorcycle around the 1930s, 1940s. The growing use of motorcycles marked a new era of mobility and independence, especially for women beginning to challenge social norms. Women practiced shooting in an indoor setting in the early 20th century. This activity was part of training programs, reflecting the growing inclusion of women in activities once restricted to men. An indigenous man wears traditional attire with a feathered headdress and decorated clothing in the early 20th century. These garments carry cultural and spiritual meanings, representing identity, status, and traditions within the community. A woman practices archery in a stadium in the early 20th century. Archery was one of the sports gaining space among women, reflecting changing social norms and greater inclusion in athletics. An experimental seaplane on the water, with 2 occupants in the early 20th century. This type of aircraft was essential in the development of aviation, allowing takeoffs and landings on rivers and seas during early tests. Little Italy, Manhattan, New York, around 1905. The neighborhood was an important center for Italian immigrants, with street markets, clothes hanging from windows, and a strong sense of community life. A man presents scientific and industrial equipment in the early 20th century. These devices are part of the technological advances of the time, related to the development of engineering, chemistry, and early industrial systems. Children and adults observe robots in a public exhibition likely between the 1950s and 1960s. The image reflects the era's fascination with automation and the technological future during the early days of robotics. A carved Mayan stone stela located in Central America, photographed in the early 20th century. These structures were used to record important events such as rains, wars, and religious rituals of the Mayan civilization. Prisoners look out through a barbed wire-covered window during World War II. The image reflects the harsh reality of prisoner camps, marked by confinement and difficult conditions. Patients rest in a makeshift ward during World War I. Temporary hospitals were common to treat the large number of wounded during the conflict. Patients recovering outdoors look at the sky while resting in beds during World War I. Fresh air was used as part of medical treatment at the time. A family living in extremely poor conditions inside a makeshift shelter, likely during a time of crisis or forced displacement. The image highlights poverty, lack of resources, and survival in harsh environments. Crew members walk along the external structure of a giant airship during inspection in the early 20th century. These aircraft defined the era of long-distance air travel before airplanes became dominant. Fans interact with musicians through a train window during a trip, amid the cultural frenzy of the 1960s. The scene reflects the powerful influence of popular music on youth at the time. Preserved bodies found in old wooden coffins, revealing burial practices and preservation conditions over the centuries. The image shows how some human remains can stay partially intact over time. A crowd gathers outside a movie theater showing a Seven Faces de Cafajeste in Brazil during the 1960s. The image highlights the strong cinema culture and lively street scene of the time.